Dear friends, Creation Care Sunday. It's another Sunday where we're celebrating our commitments affirmed by our statement of welcome. And it's taking place this coming Sunday, the 3rd of October, because it falls nearest to October 4th, the commemoration of Francis of Assisi. And so, we're going to be blessing animals during worship. If you'd like, feel free to bring an animal or a photo of an animal, whatever you think is most comfortable for you and your animal companion to be blessed. If you're a subscriber to our newsletter, you even have the ability to print out blessing cards for your animals. Now, I'm not sure we've ever had a blessing of the animals inside our building on a Sunday during a Sunday service, but now is the time to do it. Now is the time to recognize that our lives and our call as Christians requires us to move beyond old patterns that worry about maintaining the structures of things as they are more than they worry about care for this creation that God has made and of which we are a part. Fletcher Harper has recently called on religious leaders to, quote, stop preaching about being good stewards of the earth. He makes 3 points. 1, we know the names of the people and organizations driving the already beginning ecological collapse, and we must name them and call on them to change or be held accountable. 2, we must begin to articulate concrete and measurable demands for policy and behavior change in undertaking climate action. And 3, we must directly address the misery and suffering which climate change is causing and will cause, and demand compassionate responses. So much climate activism sounds like this. Greta Thunberg sounds like this. I vividly remember her saying to the leaders of the world, "How dare you?" With urgency cracking in her voice, she said, "We will not let you get away with this. Right here, right now is where we draw the line. The world is waking up and change is coming whether you like it or not." This language seems perhaps alarmist and panic-driven. After all, our cars are still running on gas and everything seems to be continuing more or less as normal. And there's a dissonance between the message coming from climate action advocates and what we wind up living in our daily lives. Some have proposed this is because climate change, like the global system of life, like the planet, is a hyper-object. It's something so massive that our human minds can't work with the actual thing due to our limited perspective. From the perspective of climate change, for example, the warming weather leads to decreased fishing populations, incentivizing costs by fishing companies who then hire the most vulnerable, the undocumented workers, for cheaper and more dangerous conditions that they are pushed into by their profit motives, meaning that fish are a problem in climate change that involves immigration justice, economic justice, ecological justice, and all too often racial justice. But there are more allies than you think. When the problem is a hyper-object, when it's everywhere, then every act of mercy and compassion is addressing it. Better border and immigration policy, international nuclear disarmament, anything that tackles the fossil fuel and coal industries and the results of their decades of propaganda. Heck, just having your pets spayed or neutered and eating less meat and dairy and taking public transit are at least a contribution to addressing the big, mind-boggling, it's everywhere and nowhere problem. The ALCA already has a whole statement on caring for creation, and I already did a 3-video discussion of that, link in the down below part. So what I want to say here is that of all the groups on earth, the people who believe in the salvation of the world through Jesus Christ, who is the crucified one, have perhaps the best way to understand this hyper-object in a helpful and hopeful way. Climate grief is pretty easy to dwell in when you've already grieved yourself and your God, and you've still celebrated the resurrection, and you still believe the whole creation will be renewed by the God who made it. Christians, we dwell in the cross. We dwell in the unmitigated grief and suffering of the whole world, but we see in that grief and suffering the presence and mercy of God. That doesn't excuse grief and suffering. It doesn't make it all okay or make it go away, but it also does not fill us with dread or despair. We look on this suffering as a place where God is not absent, but most present. And as we celebrate this Sunday, we remember Francis of Assisi, who renounced his wealth to live and die in poverty and service. And we hear in the readings of the making of creation as one big ecosystem, one big family of relationships, and of the making of all the animals as companions for humanity. We hear Jesus say that God made us all together to be good and in good relationships for each other, committed to the other, faithful. And that makes it obvious and natural for us Christians to look for new models of living and being that restore and aid the creation, the world of which we are a part. Thanks for listening to me today. I hope I'll see you on Sunday. Until then, God bless.